My name is Olive Williams, and I'm 68 years old. After decades teaching elementary school children, I'm now living in a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. My son Michael struck gold in the tech industry 5 years ago and became a millionaire overnight. We used to be so close until he married Catherine. Last Thanksgiving, Michael asked me about a lake house that I supposedly owned. I stared at him in disbelief. Before I tell you how I discovered my daughter-in-law's years of deception, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories from someone who's seen it all. Life wasn't always easy for us. When Michael was just 7 years old, my husband Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack. We had no life insurance, very little savings, and a mountain of medical bills. Overnight, I became a single mother with a young son to support. I took on multiple jobs to keep us afloat. During the day, I taught 3rd grade at Hillcrest Elementary. Evenings, I waitressed at the local diner. Weekends, I cleaned houses for wealthy families across town. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Michael was such a good boy during those hard years. He never complained about the second-hand clothes or the simple meals. Instead, he helped around the house, excelled at school, and always greeted me with a hug when I came home exhausted from my 2nd or 3rd job of the day. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a big house with a garden," he would say, his small face serious with determination. "Just focus on your studies, sweetheart," I would reply, ruffling his hair. "That's how you'll build a good future." And focus he did. Michael was gifted with numbers and computers. By high school, he was building websites for local businesses. I saved every penny I could for his college fund, even selling my mother's antique jewelry and our family silver. When acceptance letters arrived from several prestigious universities, I knew all our sacrifices had been worth it. Though we couldn't afford the tuition at most of them, Michael received a partial scholarship to State University. I took out loans for the remainder, insisting that he focus on his studies rather than working. "Mom, I can get a job to help," Michael protested. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "This is your time to learn and build your future. Don't worry about me." Those college years were lean ones for me, but I never let Michael know. I moved to a smaller apartment, cut back on everything except the occasional care package I sent him. When we talked on the phone, I shared only positive news, wanting him to concentrate on his education without worrying about his mother back home. Michael graduated with honors in computer science. Within 2 years, he had joined a promising startup developing security software. And then when he was 35, everything changed. His company was acquired by a tech giant for millions, and my son became wealthy beyond anything we'd ever imagined. At first, nothing changed between us. We still had our Sunday phone calls. He visited regularly, taking me to dinner, helping around my apartment. He offered to buy me a house, but I gently refused, not wanting to impose on his newfound success. "Mom, you worked so hard for me all those years," he insisted. "Let me do something for you now." "Seeing you successful is all the reward I need," I told him, and I meant it. My pride in Michael went beyond his financial achievements. He had grown into a kind, hardworking man with integrity, and that mattered more to me than any amount of money. Then Michael met Catherine at a charity gala. She was stunning with perfect blonde hair, designer clothes, and the polished confidence that comes from a privileged upbringing. The daughter of a retired banking executive, Catherine moved in social circles that were entirely foreign to our humble backgrounds. I still remember the day Michael brought her to meet me. I had spent the morning cleaning my small apartment, baking cookies from scratch, and preparing a homemade lunch. Catherine arrived in a cloud of expensive perfume, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "So, this is where you grew up?" she said to Michael, glancing around my living room with barely disguised disdain. "Actually, we lived in a different apartment then," Michael explained, not seeming to notice her tone. "Mom moved here after I went to college." "How quaint," Catherine replied, not making eye contact with me. Throughout that lunch, I tried my best to connect with her, asking about her family, her interests, her work at an art gallery that I later learned her father had purchased for her. Her answers were polite but distant, as if she were performing a necessary social obligation rather than meeting her boyfriend's mother. After they left, Michael called me. "Isn't she amazing, Mom? What did you think?" "She seems very sophisticated," I said carefully, not wanting to dampen his obvious enthusiasm. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" "Happier than I've ever been," he declared, and I chose to be happy for him. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within a year, they were engaged. The wedding was a lavish affair at a historic mansion with hundreds of guests, most of whom I'd never met. Catherine's parents hosted with an ostentation that made me feel increasingly out of place. During the reception, I overheard Catherine's mother talking to another guest. "Michael comes from such humble beginnings, it's remarkable he's turned out so well. We're doing our best to introduce him to the right people now." I pretended not to hear, focusing instead on how handsome my son looked in his tuxedo and how radiant his smile was whenever he looked at his new bride. After the wedding, the changes became more noticeable. Our weekly phone calls dwindled to monthly, then to occasional texts. Michael was always apologetic, citing work commitments, travel schedules, social obligations that Catherine had arranged. When they bought a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, I wasn't invited to the housewarming party. I only saw pictures on social media posted by mutual friends who didn't realize I hadn't been there. Meanwhile, I continued living in my small rental apartment, now retired from teaching with a modest pension. I developed arthritis in my hands and knees, making the winters particularly difficult. When I fell on some ice and fractured my wrist 2 years ago, a neighbor drove me to the hospital and helped with groceries during my recovery. I never told Michael about it, not wanting to burden him with my problems. All those years of hard work had taken a toll on my health, but I had no regrets. My son was successful and seemed happy with his beautiful wife. At least, that's what I believed until last Thanksgiving. I first met Catherine 5 years ago on a sunny spring afternoon. Michael had been dating her for a few weeks and was eager for us to meet. "She's different from anyone I've ever known, Mom," he told me, his voice vibrating with excitement over the phone. "I think she might be the one." When they arrived at my apartment, Catherine was impeccably dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Her jewelry was understated but obviously expensive, and her manicure was flawless. Next to her in my second-hand furniture and budget clothing, I felt shabby and inadequate. "Mrs. Williams, I've heard so much about you," Catherine said, air-kissing my cheek in a way that ensured her makeup wouldn't smudge. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which remained coolly appraising. "Please call me Olive," I insisted, trying to bridge the obvious gap between us. "I've made some lunch if you're hungry." "Oh, we actually have reservations at Bellini's in an hour," Catherine replied smoothly. "But we can stay for a quick cup of tea." Michael looked surprised. "We do. You didn't mention that earlier." "I wanted it to be a surprise, darling," she said, touching his arm possessively. "I know how much you love their truffle pasta." I watched as my son's confusion melted into pleasure at her thoughtfulness, unaware that she had just sabotaged our lunch plans. It was the first of many such incidents, small enough to seem coincidental, but deliberate enough to establish a pattern. At family gatherings, Catherine would subtly exclude me. During Michael's birthday dinner at their house, she seated me at the opposite end of the table from my son, between 2 of her friends who spoke exclusively about country club memberships and European vacations. When I brought homemade apple pie, Michael's favorite dessert since childhood, Catherine intercepted it before it reached the table. "Oh, we've already ordered a gourmet cake from that French patisserie," she said, taking the pie from my hands. "But how sweet of you to bring this. I'll put it in the kitchen." The pie never appeared, and when Michael asked about dessert options later, Catherine made no mention of it. After the party, as I was leaving, I overheard Catherine speaking to her mother in the hallway. "Michael's mother is such an embarrassment," she said in a low voice. "Did you see that polyester blouse she was wearing? And she brought a homemade pie to a formal dinner? It's like she has no sense of what's appropriate. I quietly slipped past them to the front door, my cheeks burning with humiliation. Still, I said nothing to Michael, not wanting to come between him and his new wife. As the months passed, Catherine took increasing control over their finances and gift-giving. When Christmas came, Michael called to tell me they were spending the holiday at a ski resort in Switzerland with Catherine's family. "I've sent you a package, Mom," he said. "It should arrive before Christmas Day." No package ever came. When I mentioned it casually during our next phone conversation, Catherine answered before Michael could. "The delivery company is so unreliable during the holidays," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'll look into it right away." A week later, she texted me. Apparently, the package was delivered to the wrong address and couldn't be recovered. So unfortunate. This became a pattern. Birthday presents, Mother's Day flowers. Even the occasional check that Michael mentioned sending never reached me. Each time, Catherine had an explanation: ready delivery errors, banking mistakes, postal service failures. Meanwhile, invitations to family events became increasingly lost or last minute. "Didn't you get our email about Thanksgiving dinner?" Catherine would ask innocently when I called Michael, having heard nothing about their plans. "It must have gone to your spam folder. We're so sorry, but all the arrangements are already made." When I did manage to attend family gatherings, Catherine would find subtle ways to make me feel out of place. She'd reference inside jokes I wasn't part of, discuss events I hadn't been invited to, or make comments about my appearance that sounded like compliments but felt like criticisms. "That outfit is so appropriate for someone your age," she might say. Or, "Your hair looks so much better than the last time we saw you." I watched as she gradually isolated Michael, not just from me, but from his old college friends and former colleagues as well. Their social circle became exclusively composed of Catherine's friends and business connections that could advance Michael's career or enhance their social standing. Several times I tried to connect with Catherine one-on-one, inviting her for lunch or offering to help with household tasks when I visited. She always declined politely, but firmly maintaining an impenetrable wall of courtesy that kept me at a distance. "Thank you, Olive, but I already have a wonderful housekeeper," she would say. Or, "I'm so sorry, but my schedule is completely full this month." Catherine's excessive spending became legendary among their friends. She redecorated their mansion 3 times in 2 years, each time discarding perfectly good furniture and artwork for newer, more fashionable pieces. Her closet contained hundreds of designer outfits, many still with tags attached. She insisted on a new luxury car every year and vacationed only at the most exclusive resorts. Meanwhile, I continued to live frugally in my small apartment, making do with what I had and saving what I could from my teacher's pension. The contrast between our lifestyles couldn't have been more stark, but it didn't bother me. What hurt was the growing distance between Michael and me and the knowledge that his wife saw me as an embarrassment rather than family. Still, I kept my concerns to myself, not wanting to force Michael to choose between his mother and his wife. I made excuses for Catherine's behavior, telling myself she was young and would mature with time. I convinced myself that as long as Michael was happy, I could endure being pushed to the periphery of his life. But as the years passed, it became increasingly difficult to maintain this optimistic view, especially as the pattern of missing gifts and forgotten invitations continued. Deep down, I began to suspect there was more to the situation than simple oversight or bad luck. Over time, I noticed a disturbing pattern emerging. Gifts that Michael mentioned sending never arrived at my doorstep. It started with small things, like a birthday package he asked about during our phone call. "Did you like the sweater, Mom? I picked the blue one because I know it's your favorite color," he said enthusiastically. My heart sank as I realized I'd received nothing. "I haven't checked my mail today," I lied, not wanting to disappoint him. Later, when I called to tell him nothing had arrived, Catherine answered the phone. These delivery companies are so unreliable, she said smoothly. I'll have Michael look into it right away. The sweater never came, and somehow the topic was always diverted whenever I tried to bring it up again. This happened repeatedly. A Christmas check that Michael mentioned never appeared in my mailbox. Mother's Day flowers that he thought I had received were never delivered. Concert tickets to a symphony performance that Michael was sure he had sent went missing. Mom, why didn't you come to the concert? Those were front row seats, Michael asked, sounding hurt. What concert, dear? I never received any tickets, I replied, confused. But I gave them to Catherine to mail to you weeks ago. She said you called to say you weren't feeling well enough to attend. I never made such a call. The realization that Catherine was actively interfering with Michael's attempts to stay connected with me was both heartbreaking and infuriating. But without proof, it was my word against hers, and I didn't want to create conflict between my son and his wife based solely on suspicion. Catherine became adept at managing the information flow between Michael and me. She would often answer his phone when I called, claiming he was busy, then forget to give him the message. Emails I sent sometimes went unanswered, and when I asked about them later, Michael would look genuinely surprised. I never saw that email, Mom. Maybe it went to my spam folder. Last Thanksgiving had been particularly lonely. Michael and Catherine had gone to the Bahamas with her family, a last-minute trip that I learned about only after they had already left. I spent the holiday with my neighbor Martha, a kind widow who invited me to join her small gathering. This year, I had expected more of the same, which is why I was surprised to receive a text from Michael 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Mom, Catherine, and I would like to come for Thanksgiving this year. Is that okay with you? I read the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed my reply. Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to have you both. Later that day, Michael called to confirm the plan. Catherine thought it would be nice to have a more intimate Thanksgiving this year, he explained. Just the 3 of us. In the background, I could hear Catherine's voice tense and clipped. Tell her we'll bring the wine and dessert. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for their visit. Despite my limited budget, I splurged on a small turkey, fresh vegetables, and ingredients for all of Michael's favorite side dishes. I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom, put fresh flowers on the table, and even bought a new tablecloth to cover my worn dining table. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke early to start cooking. As I prepared the stuffing, using my mother's recipe, memories of past Thanksgivings flooded back. Michael as a little boy helping me mix the ingredients with his small hands. Michael as a teenager carving the turkey with careful precision. Michael in college, bringing a roommate home because the boy couldn't afford to fly back to his family. Those had been happy times, despite our financial struggles. We had each other, and that was enough. I wondered when and how things had changed so dramatically between us. As I peeled potatoes at the sink, I found myself blinking back tears. It wasn't the money or success that had created this distance, I realized. It was Catherine's deliberate campaign to separate Michael from his past, including his mother. Still, I was determined to make this Thanksgiving special. Maybe, just maybe, it could be the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my hair, straightened my best blouse, and went to welcome my son and his wife to my home. The knock came at exactly 2 o'clock. I opened the door to find Michael standing there with a bottle of wine, his smile warm and genuine. Catherine stood slightly behind him, her expression carefully neutral. Mom! Michael wrapped me in a hug that felt like coming home. Something smells amazing in here. Michael, Catherine, come in, I said, stepping back to welcome them into my small apartment. Everything's almost ready. Catherine entered with the practiced grace of someone making an appearance rather than a visit. Your place is looking cozy, Olive, she said, handing me a bakery box. Store-bought pumpkin pie. I didn't want you to go to any trouble. Thank you, I replied, accepting the box. But I've actually made an apple pie. It was always Michael's favorite. Was it? Catherine raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. He only ever eats pumpkin pie at our house. Michael seemed not to notice the tension. He was looking around my apartment with interest, noticing the new curtains I'd hung and the family photos I'd arranged on the mantel. You've redecorated a bit, Mom. Just spruced things up, I said with a smile. Come sit down. The turkey should be ready in about 15 minutes. We settled in the living room, Michael immediately relaxing into the old armchair that had been his favorite spot since college. Catherine perched on the edge of the sofa, declining my offer of a pre-dinner drink. I'm watching my calories, she explained, glancing meaningfully at my modest figure. But you should go ahead if you want something. The conversation was stilted at first. Catherine checked her phone repeatedly while Michael asked about my health, my friends, my volunteer work at the local library. I noticed how he carefully avoided mentioning anything related to money or material possessions, as if aware of the gulf between our circumstances. When dinner was ready, we moved to the small dining table I had set with my best dishes and my mother's old silver. The turkey was golden brown, the side dishes steaming and fragrant. Michael's eyes lit up at the sight. Wow, Mom, this looks just like Thanksgiving when I was a kid, he said, his voice warm with nostalgia. Remember how I used to sneak extra cranberry sauce when you weren't looking? You thought I didn't notice? I laughed, but I always put out extra just for you. Catherine watched our exchange with a tight smile. Your mother certainly went to a lot of effort, Michael, though I'm sure the lake house has much better cooking facilities than this tiny kitchen. I frowned, not understanding the reference. Michael looked at me with surprise. That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, Mom, he said, helping himself to mashed potatoes. How are you liking the lake house? I know winter isn't the best time to enjoy it, but the views must be incredible even now. I put down my fork, completely confused. What lake house are you talking about, Michael? Michael stopped his fork halfway to his mouth. The house at Cedar Lake, the one I bought for you 2 years ago. He looked at me intently. You did get the keys and documents right. Catherine said she delivered them to you personally, since it was such a special gift. My heart began to pound as I realized what was happening. I glanced at Catherine, whose face had gone very pale beneath her perfect makeup. Michael, I said slowly, I never received any keys. I don't own a lake house. This is the first I'm hearing of it. The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Michael turned to Catherine, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension. Catherine, what's going on? You told me you gave Mom the keys and all the paperwork. You said she was thrilled. Catherine's composure slipped for just a moment before she regained control. There must be some misunderstanding, she said smoothly. Olive is getting older, and sometimes memory can be an issue at her age. Perhaps she forgot. I'm 68, not senile, I said quietly but firmly. I would remember if someone gave me a house, Catherine. Michael's face had hardened into an expression I rarely saw his jaw set with anger. What about the other gifts, Mom? The Christmas checks, the birthday presents, the concert tickets. I shook my head slowly. Nothing ever arrived, Michael. Whenever I mentioned it, Catherine always had an explanation about lost mail or delivery problems. Catherine stood up abruptly, her napkin falling to the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of lying. She reached for her purse, but Michael's next words stopped her. Sit down, Catherine. His voice was quiet, but had an edge of steel I'd never heard before. We're going to figure this out right now. For the first time since I'd known her, Catherine looked uncertain, even frightened. She slowly returned to her chair, her hands trembling slightly. Tell me about the lake house, Michael said to her. The one I paid $350,000 for 2 years ago. The one that's in my mother's name. Catherine's face flushed. I was trying to protect you, Michael. Your mother never appreciated anything you did for her. She was always asking for more. I thought if she had a valuable property, she'd stop draining our resources. I gasped at the blatant lie. I never asked Michael for anything, I protested. Not once since he became successful. Michael didn't look at Catherine as he pulled out his phone and began scrolling through it. Here it is, he said after a moment. The purchase agreement for 1475 Lakeshore Drive, Cedar Lake. Signed 2 years ago and put in your name, Mom. He turned the phone so I could see the document. There it was in black and white. A beautiful lake house that apparently belonged to me that I knew nothing about. I never received any paperwork, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I never even knew this place existed. Michael turned to Catherine, his expression now cold with fury. Where are the keys? And where have the property tax bills been going? They should have been sent to Mom. Catherine's mask finally slipped completely. Fine, she snapped. The house has been rented out. The income goes into an account I manage. It was supposed to be for emergencies for our future. You stole from my mother, Michael said, each word precise and cutting. You intercepted gifts meant for her, lied to both of us for years, and have been collecting rental income from a property that isn't yours. Catherine's face contorted with sudden rage. Your precious mother was holding you back, she hissed. Always playing the martyr with her sacrifices and her little apartment and her secondhand clothes. You were becoming an embarrassment among our friends, always talking about how hard she worked to put you through college. Do you think anyone in our circle wants to hear those kinds of stories? I sat frozen in my chair, shocked by the venom in her voice. This was the real Catherine finally revealed. You were so determined to give her everything, Catherine continued, her voice rising. Money that should have been building our future, a lake house she doesn't even need when we could have used it for entertaining. I was protecting our interests, Michael. Everything I did was for us. Michael stood up slowly, his face pale with anger. There is no us anymore, Catherine. Pack your things and get out of my mother's home. We're done. Catherine's eyes widened as she realized she had finally gone too far. Michael, you can't mean that. Everything I did because I love you. Your mother is manipulating you. Can't you see that? The only manipulation here has been yours. Michael replied, his voice steady. And it ends today. Catherine looked from Michael to me, seeming to calculate her options. Then she grabbed her purse and stood up. This isn't over, she said, her voice cold. You'll regret choosing her over me. I promise you that. With those words, she stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. The silence after Catherine left was heavy and thick. Michael stood motionless by the table, his face a mask of shock and pain. The Thanksgiving feast, which I had prepared with such care and hope, lay forgotten between us. Mom, he finally said, his voice cracking. I am so sorry. I had no idea. I stood up and went to him, wrapping my arms around my son for the first time in what felt like years. It's not your fault, I whispered. You couldn't have known. We sat together on the sofa, the dinner growing cold, as Michael began to piece together the extent of Catherine's deception. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through emails and documents. The lake house was supposed to be a surprise for your 66th birthday, he explained, showing me pictures of a beautiful 2-story home on the shores of Cedar Lake. I put it in your name so you'd have financial security. Catherine volunteered to handle all the paperwork since I was traveling for business that month. My hands trembled as I looked at the photos of a home that was apparently mine, a place I had never seen, except in these images on Michael's phone. There were other things, too. Michael continued, his voice hollow. Jewelry for your birthdays. Travel vouchers so you could visit us when we were abroad. Monthly checks to supplement your pension. I never received any of it, I said softly. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his expression anguished. I thought you were just being independent, not cashing the checks, not using the travel vouchers. Catherine told me you preferred your simple life, that you didn't want to impose on us by visiting. As we talked, more and more deceptions came to light. Catherine had intercepted letters I'd sent to Michael. She had blocked my number from his phone during certain periods, claiming the service was unreliable when he was traveling. She had deliberately scheduled important events when she knew I had other commitments, then told Michael I had declined their invitations. All those times I thought you were too busy for me, I said, tears welling in my eyes. And all the times I thought you were pulling away, wanting your own space, Michael replied, his voice rough with emotion. We sat together for hours, reconstructing the elaborate web of lies Catherine had spun around us. As the truth emerged, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak for my son and relief that the distance between us hadn't been real after all. What will you do now? I asked as evening fell and the reality of his situation sank in. First, I'm going to make sure you get everything that should have been yours, Michael said firmly. Tomorrow, we're going to visit your lake house. The next morning, after a night spent talking until the early hours, Michael drove me to Cedar Lake. The property was about an hour outside the city, in a peaceful wooded area overlooking crystal-clear water. As we pulled up to the charming two-story house with its wraparound porch, I felt a surge of disbelief that this beautiful place supposedly belonged to me. Michael had called ahead to the property management company that Catherine had hired, demanding they meet us with the keys. A nervous young man was waiting in the driveway holding an envelope and looking uncomfortable. Mr. Williams, he greeted Michael, glancing at me curiously. Here are the keys as requested. Mrs. Williams asked that we not disturb the current tenants, but they're actually between rentals right now. The last family moved out last week. This is my mother, Olive Williams, Michael said pointedly. She's the legal owner of this property, and she'll be making all decisions about it from now on. The property manager looked confused. But Mrs. Williams has been managing it since purchase. She handles all the rental agreements and collects the income. That arrangement has been terminated, Michael said firmly. Please update your records and direct all future communications to my mother or to me. As we walked through the house, I was overwhelmed by its beauty. Spacious rooms with large windows overlooked the lake. A stone fireplace dominated the living area. The kitchen was modern and well-equipped. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms provided ample space for family and guests. This has been generating rental income for 2 years, Michael said, his expression dark. Money that should have been coming to you. I touched his arm gently. Let's not focus on that right now, I said. What matters is that we know the truth. We can fix things moving forward. But fixing things proved more complicated than either of us anticipated. When Michael returned to the city that evening to confront Catherine, he found she had already cleared out her personal items from their home and left a note with her lawyer's contact information. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal consultations, financial investigations, and emotional revelations. Michael discovered that Catherine had been systematically diverting funds from their joint accounts to her personal savings for years. She had charged extravagant purchases to his credit cards while maintaining the image of a devoted wife. More painfully, Michael learned from friends that Catherine had often complained about him behind his back, mocking his background and ambitions. She had apparently married him primarily for his money and social standing, with plans to leave once she had secured enough financial stability for herself. Throughout this difficult period, I did my best to support Michael without criticizing Catherine too harshly. He was already beating himself up for not seeing through her deception sooner. I should have known, he said repeatedly. There were so many red flags. Love makes us want to believe the best about people, I told him. You saw what she wanted you to see. As Christmas approached, Michael suggested we spend it at the lake house. Let's start some new traditions, Mom. Just the two of us. The day before Christmas Eve, Michael arrived at my apartment with several boxes. I found these in a storage unit Catherine rented. He explained, his expression grim. They're your things, Mom. Things she claimed were lost or misplaced over the years. Inside the boxes were family photographs, letters I had written to Michael, gifts I had given him that I thought he had discarded. Catherine had systematically removed any meaningful connection to me from Michael's life, storing these treasures away where neither of us would find them. That Christmas at the lake house was bittersweet. We decorated a small tree with old ornaments rescued from storage. We cooked together in the spacious kitchen, laughing over shared memories and creating new ones. In the evenings, we sat by the fireplace, talking about the past and cautiously planning for the future. I'm thinking of selling the city house, Michael told me. Too many bad memories there. What about your work? I asked. He shrugged. Most of it can be done remotely now. I could get a smaller place in the city for when I need to be there and spend more time here. He looked around the lake house thoughtfully. That is, if you don't mind having me around more often. Mind? I laughed. Having my son back in my life is the best gift I could ask for. As the new year began, I found myself adjusting to a reality I never expected. The lake house was legally mine, and Michael insisted I make it my permanent home. After decades in small apartments, the space felt almost overwhelming at first. But gradually, I began to make it my own, adding simple touches that reflected my taste, rather than Catherine's designer aesthetics. I joined a book club in the nearby town and volunteered at the local elementary school, reading to children one afternoon a week. Being around young students again brought back the joy I had known during my teaching years. Michael visited every weekend, often staying from Friday through Monday. He brought his work laptop, but made sure to set it aside for long walks by the lake, cooking experiments in the kitchen, and evenings spent playing board games or watching old movies together. Catherine filed for divorce, demanding a substantial settlement despite the prenuptial agreement she had signed. Her lawyer argued that she had contributed significantly to Michael's success by maintaining their social connections and supporting his career. Michael's legal team countered with evidence of her financial misconduct and the fraudulent management of property that wasn't hers. The case dragged on, with Catherine giving interviews to gossip columns, painting herself as the victim of a controlling husband and his interfering mother. Don't read that trash, Michael advised me when I discovered one particularly vicious article. She's desperate and lashing out. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I had fully settled into my new life at the lake house. The property that had been hidden from me for 2 years had become a true home filled with books, comfortable furniture, and the natural beauty visible from every window. Spring came to Cedar Lake with an explosion of wildflowers and birdsong. 6 months had passed since that revelatory Thanksgiving dinner, and my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The lake house that I had known nothing about was now truly mine. I had painted the walls in warm, cheerful colors that reflected my personality rather than following design trends. My old quilt covered the master bed, family photos lined the mantelpiece, and the bookshelves were filled with beloved novels and teaching memorabilia from my career. Michael had been true to his word about making things right. He had tracked down every gift that Catherine had intercepted, from jewelry to personal items, and returned them to me. He had also insisted on setting up a trust fund to replace the rental income I should have received from the lake house over the past 2 years. You don't need to do that, I protested when he showed me the documents. It's not about need, Mom, he said firmly. It's about what's right. That money was yours all along. The divorce proceedings with Catherine continued, though the initial media frenzy had died down. Her attempts to portray herself as a victim had largely failed, after financial investigators uncovered the extent of her deception. The lakefront property was just one part of a larger pattern of financial manipulation. Michael had moved out of their mansion in the city, selling it and purchasing a smaller, more comfortable condo downtown for when work required his physical presence. But increasingly, he worked remotely from the guest room he had claimed at the lake house, coming and going as his schedule allowed. I had worried initially that he was spending too much time with me out of guilt or obligation, but as the months passed, I realized he was healing. The betrayal had cut deep, but here, away from the artificial world Catherine had created around them, Michael was rediscovering what truly mattered to him. I found my own rhythm in this new life as well. I started a small reading group for children at the lake house every Wednesday afternoon. Parents would drop off their kids, and we would read stories, perform small plays, and enjoy snacks on the porch overlooking the water. The joy of teaching, which had defined my career, found a new expression in these gatherings. I also began mentoring young mothers in the community, many of whom were struggling with the challenges of raising children while working full-time. Having navigated those difficult waters myself as a single mother, I found deep fulfillment in offering guidance and support to women facing similar challenges. "You've created a whole new purpose here," Michael observed one evening as we sat on the porch after one of my reading groups had departed. "It's amazing to watch." "Life gives us second chances sometimes," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We just have to be brave enough to take them." Catherine made one last attempt at reconciliation with Michael about 4 months after Thanksgiving. She appeared at his condo unannounced, tearful, and seemingly repentant. Michael listened to her apologies and promises to change, then asked one simple question. "Why did you really marry me, Catherine?" Her answer revealed everything. She talked about his potential, his connections, the lifestyle she had envisioned for them. Not once did she mention love, respect, or genuine care for him as a person. "I think that says it all," Michael told her quietly, showing her to the door. When he related this story to me later, I could see that a weight had lifted from him. The final illusions about his marriage had been stripped away, allowing him to move forward without regret or second-guessing his decisions. As spring turned to early summer, Michael mentioned that he had met someone at a charity event for literacy. Her name was Laura, a children's book illustrator, with a warm laugh and no interest in the trappings of wealth. "I'd like you to meet her mom," he said tentatively, "but only if you're comfortable with that." "I'd love to meet her," I assured him, touched by his consideration. Laura came to the lake house for a weekend in June, bringing sketches for the children in my reading group and homemade cookies for our afternoon tea. She was genuine, unpretentious, and clearly smitten with my son for all the right reasons. "Your mom is exactly as wonderful as you described," I overheard her telling Michael as they walked along the lakeshore. "I can see where you get your kindness." Watching them together, I felt a deep sense of peace. The pain and deception of the past few years had led us here to this unexpected place of new beginnings and authentic connections. As Thanksgiving approached again, almost a year after the confrontation that had changed everything, Michael suggested hosting a proper celebration at the lake house. "Let's reclaim the holiday," he said. "Make new memories to replace the painful ones." We invited neighbors, friends from my reading group, some of Michael's colleagues who had supported him through the divorce, and Laura, who had become a regular visitor to the lake house. Together, we prepared a feast that honored tradition while celebrating our new reality. Standing in the kitchen that Thanksgiving morning, watching the sunrise over the lake, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The years of hard work as a single mother, the gradual loss of connection with my son, the painful revelations about Catherine's deception, and now this unexpected chapter of renewal and joy. The lake house, once a symbol of betrayal, had transformed into a home filled with genuine love and new possibilities. My relationship with Michael, nearly destroyed by Catherine's manipulations, was now stronger and more authentic than ever before. That evening, as we gathered around the table with our guests, Michael raised his glass for a toast. "To truth," he said, his eyes meeting mine across the table. "And to second chances." "To family," I added softly. "The kind we choose and cherish every day." As I looked around at the faces of our guests, illuminated by candlelight and warm with affection, I realized that the most valuable gift I had received wasn't the lake house or the financial security it provided. It was the restoration of truth in my relationship with my son and the opportunity to build a life based on authentic connections rather than appearances. Catherine's deception had nearly destroyed us both, but in the end, it had led us to a more meaningful existence than either of us might have found otherwise. There was a certain poetic justice in that outcome, a reminder that even our most painful experiences can ultimately lead us toward greater wisdom and deeper joy. The warm June breeze carried the scent of wildflowers through the open windows of the lake house as I arranged cookies on a platter for my weekly reading group. 1 year had passed since that fateful Thanksgiving that had changed everything, and my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I glanced at the clock, noting that the children would be arriving soon. My reading group had grown from 5 neighborhood kids to 15 regular attendees ranging in age from 4 to 12. We had just finished Charlotte's Web and were celebrating with a special outdoor party today. The sound of tires on gravel announced an early arrival. Through the kitchen window, I watched Michael's car pull into the driveway. He stepped out, followed by Laura, both carrying bags of supplies for our party. "Mom," Michael called as they entered through the back door. "We brought everything on your list, plus some face paint Laura thought the kids might enjoy." Laura set her bags on the counter and gave me a warm hug. "The bookstore in town also had those nature guides you wanted for the older kids," she said, pulling colorfully illustrated books from her tote bag. In the months since I'd first met Laura, she had become like family. Her genuine warmth and creativity complemented Michael's more analytical nature perfectly. More importantly, she valued him for who he was, not what he owned or could provide. "You two are lifesavers," I said, accepting their help with grateful relief. "The table still needs to be set up on the lawn." As Michael headed outside to arrange tables and chairs, Laura stayed to help me with the food. "How are you feeling about next week?" she asked quietly. Next week marked the final court date in Michael's divorce proceedings. Catherine had fought every step of the way, dragging out the process with increasingly desperate claims and demands. "Ready for it to be over," I admitted. "For Michael's sake, more than anything." Laura nodded, understanding. "He's in a good place now, Olive. Whatever happens in court, he's already moved forward with his life." The past year had been a journey of healing for both Michael and me. After discovering Catherine's deception, Michael had thrown himself into recovering what was stolen, not just material possessions, but our relationship as well. We had discovered that Catherine's manipulation went beyond intercepting gifts and hiding the lake house. She had deleted emails I had sent, screened his phone calls, and systematically isolated him from not just me, but anyone who reminded him of his life before wealth. Most shocking was the discovery that Catherine had been planning to leave him all along. Financial investigators found evidence that she had been secretly transferring funds to offshore accounts for years, preparing for an eventual split once she had secured enough money. "She never loved me," Michael had said one evening as we sat on the dock watching the sunset. "I was just a means to an end for her." "Some people don't know how to love," I had replied gently. "They only know how to take." The divorce had exposed Catherine's true nature to their social circle. Former friends distanced themselves as the details became public. Catherine had responded by giving tear-filled interviews to sympathetic journalists, painting herself as the victim of a controlling husband and his interfering mother. But as more evidence emerged, her story fell apart. The rental income from the lake house diverted to her personal accounts. The intercepted gifts, the lies told to both of us over years. Even Catherine's most loyal supporters couldn't ignore the pattern of deliberate deception. Through it all, Michael had focused on rebuilding his life with quiet determination. He split his time between his condo in the city and the lake house, establishing a healthier balance between work and personal life. He reconnected with old friends that Catherine had deemed not good enough for their social circle, and gradually the shadows lifted from his eyes. My own journey had been equally transformative. After years of living in a small apartment making do with my teacher's pension, I now owned a beautiful home that provided both security and purpose. The reading groups, mentoring sessions, and community gatherings I hosted had given me a new sense of connection and contribution. The sound of children's voices pulled me from my reflections. Cars were arriving, and excited kids were spilling onto the lawn where Michael had set up tables decorated with farm animal centerpieces to match our Charlotte's Web theme. Laura and I carried trays of snacks outside, where parents chatted with Michael while children raced around playing tag. This scene of community and joy was so far removed from the lonely Thanksgivings I had spent in my apartment, believing my son had moved beyond needing his mother in his life. After the reading celebration ended and the last family drove away, Michael, Laura, and I sat on the porch, enjoying the peaceful evening. "I have some news," Michael said, reaching for Laura's hand. We weren't going to say anything until after the divorce was finalized, but he looked at Laura with a smile. "We're engaged." Laura finished, her face glowing with happiness. "We wanted you to be the first to know, Olive." Joy bubbled up inside me as I hugged them both. "That's wonderful news. I couldn't be happier for you two." "We're thinking of a small ceremony right here by the lake," Michael said. "Nothing extravagant, just the people who really matter to us." The contrast with his lavish first wedding, driven by Catherine's desire for social status, couldn't have been more striking. This decision reflected the values Michael had reclaimed, the understanding that genuine connections matter more than appearances. Later, after Laura had gone home, and Michael and I were cleaning up the last of the party decorations, he grew reflective. "You know what I realized recently, Mom? If Catherine hadn't tried to keep us apart, if she hadn't hidden the lake house, we might never have discovered what she was really like. We might have gone on for years in that artificial life, growing further apart while thinking it was normal." I considered his words carefully. "Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the greatest healing," I said. "I wouldn't wish what happened on anyone, but I'm grateful for where it led us." 1 week later, the divorce was finalized. Catherine received far less than she had demanded, her financial misconduct having undermined her claims. Michael returned to the lake house that evening, looking lighter than he had in months. "It's over," he said simply. Finally, over. We celebrated with a quiet dinner on the porch, watching fireflies emerge as dusk settled over the water. Laura joined us, bringing champagne and 3 crystal glasses that had belonged to her grandmother. "To new beginnings," she toasted, raising her glass. "And to hard-won wisdom," Michael added. I looked at my son, seeing the man he had become through this crucible of betrayal and recovery. The pain had tempered him, burned away illusions, and left something stronger and more authentic in their place. As for me, I had rediscovered my voice and purpose. The years of silence, of accepting exclusion and distance to keep peace, were behind me. At 69, I had found an unexpected second chapter, rich with meaningful connections and daily joy. The lake house, once a symbol of deception, had become a gathering place for genuine community. The wealth that Catherine had sought to control now served to enrich lives beyond our immediate family. And the truth, painful as it had been to uncover, had ultimately set us free. That Thanksgiving Day confrontation had been the breaking point, of years of manipulation. But it had also been the beginning of healing. Like a bone that breaks and grows back stronger at the point of fracture, our family had endured pain and emerged more resilient. As the stars appeared over the lake, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led Michael to ask that innocent question about the lake house. In that moment of confusion and revelation, a hidden truth had been exposed to the light, beginning a journey that brought us all to this place of authentic connection and renewed purpose. True family, I had learned, isn't defined by appearances or social expectations. It's built through genuine care, mutual respect, and the courage to face difficult truths together. Catherine had never understood that lesson, seeking only what could benefit her personally. But in her deception, she had inadvertently led us back to what really mattered all along. What's your story of discovering a betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Have you ever had a painful revelation that changed your life for the good? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most beautiful transformations.